I never thought the words that would destroy me would come from my own daughter's mouth, standing in our family kitchen on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Emma had just gotten accepted into her dream photography program at the San Francisco Art Institute. Full scholarship. Everything she'd worked towards since she was 12 years old. I was arranging the congratulatory flowers I'd bought, planning her favorite dinner, when she walked in with that look on her face. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The look I'd seen too many times before. The one that meant she was about to say something that would cut deep. Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen without interrupting. Her voice was steady, controlled, like she'd practiced this moment. I set down the vase, my hands already trembling, though I didn't know why. Emma sat across from me at our old oak table. The same table where we'd shared thousands of meals, where I'd helped her with homework, where we'd planned her future together. I'm not going to San Francisco, she said, her green eyes meeting mine with a determination I'd never seen before. I'm turning down the scholarship. I'm moving to Portland with Jake instead, and we're starting a food truck business. The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything I'd sacrificed, every extra shift I'd worked at the hospital, every penny I'd saved, every dream I'd put on hold to make sure she could pursue hers. Emma, you can't be serious. This is your dream, remember? Since you were a little girl, you've wanted to be a photographer, to study art, to… No, Mom, she interrupted, her voice rising. That was your dream for me. You never asked what I actually wanted. You just decided what my life should look like, and expected me to follow along like some puppet. She stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked our small backyard where she used to play as a child. Do you know what it's like growing up with a mother who has every minute of your day planned out? Who shows up to every school event with a camera and a notebook, taking pictures and notes like you're documenting some science experiment? I felt my cheeks burning. I was supporting you. I was there for you. How many mothers would give up their own careers to make sure their daughter had every opportunity? Give up your career? Emma's laugh was bitter, cruel. Mom, you were a nurse. You didn't give up some grand career. You worked at a job you hated and then came home and made that my problem. You lived your unfulfilled dreams through me, and I'm suffocating under the weight of them. Each word was like a knife twisting deeper. I had worked as a pediatric nurse for 18 years, and yes, there were days I hated it, days when the stress and the sadness overwhelmed me. But I'd done it for her, for us, for the stable life I wanted to give her after her father walked out when she was 3. Emma, that's not fair. Everything I did was for you. Everything you did was for the version of me that existed in your head, she shot back. The perfect daughter who would become a famous photographer, who would make you proud, who would justify all your sacrifices. But I'm not her, Mom. I never was. She turned back to face me, and I saw tears in her eyes, but her jaw was set with resolve. Jake and I are leaving next week. We've already put a deposit down on an apartment, and we're buying a used food truck. I'm going to pursue my real passion, cooking, not the one you assigned to me. The room spun around me. Jake Morrison, the boy she'd been dating for 8 months. The college dropout who worked part-time at a local restaurant and rode a motorcycle. The boy I'd tried so hard to be polite about while secretly hoping she'd outgrow him. Emma, you're throwing away your future for some boy in a food truck? Do you hear yourself? Do you know how many people would kill for the opportunity you're walking away from? There it is, she said, her voice turning cold. There's the mother I know. The one who thinks she knows better than everyone else, who can't imagine that maybe, just maybe, other people have different dreams and goals. She grabbed her purse from the counter, slinging it over her shoulder. I'm staying at Jake's tonight. We need to finish packing. Emma, please, let's talk about this rationally. You're making a huge mistake. The only mistake I made was waiting this long to tell you the truth. She paused at the kitchen doorway, her hand on the frame. Mom, you want to know what Jake said when I told him about how you plan every detail of my life? He said living with you must be like being trapped in a nightmare you can't wake up from. And you know what? He's right. The words hung in the air between us like a poison cloud. A nightmare they couldn't wake up from. Is that really how she saw me? Is that what I'd become? The loving, devoted mother who had restructured her entire existence around her daughter's success and happiness? That's cruel, Emma, I whispered, my voice breaking. Maybe, she said, not looking back. But it's also true. I'll come by tomorrow for the rest of my things. The front door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the congratulatory flowers and the dinner I'd never get to serve. I sat there for hours, replaying every moment of Emma's childhood, every decision I'd made, every sacrifice that had led us to this point. Had I really been that controlling? That suffocating? I thought about the photo albums I'd meticulously maintained, documenting every milestone, every achievement. The way I'd researched the best art programs, the best scholarships, the best opportunities for her future. The way I'd worked double shifts to pay for her art supplies, her photography equipment, her portfolio development classes. When Emma was 7 and showed interest in taking pictures with my old camera, I'd signed her up for photography classes. When she won a local contest at age 10, I'd framed the certificate and hung it prominently in our living room. When she expressed interest in art school during her sophomore year of high school, I'd spent countless hours researching programs, deadlines, requirements. I'd driven her to campus visits, helped her prepare her portfolio, celebrated with her when the acceptance letter arrived. But now, sitting in the growing darkness of our empty house, I wondered if Emma was right. Had I been living vicariously through her? Had I pushed her toward photography because I'd always been fascinated by art, but never had the courage or opportunity to pursue it myself? After her father left, taking with him not just his presence, but my dreams of traveling, of maybe going back to school myself, of having a partner to share life's burdens, had I transferred all those deferred dreams onto my 3-year-old daughter? The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I couldn't face the cheerful questions from my coworkers about Emma's scholarship, couldn't pretend everything was fine when my world had just imploded. Instead, I sat in my bathrobe drinking coffee and staring at the walls covered with Emma's artwork, her awards, her photographs. Evidence of the life I'd so carefully curated for her. Around noon, Emma returned with Jake and 2 of his friends. They moved through the house like an efficient team, packing boxes and loading them into Jake's pickup truck. I watched from the kitchen window as they carried out her easel, her photography equipment, the desk I'd bought for her 16th birthday. Jake was tall and lean with dark hair that always looked like he'd just run his fingers through it. He wore ripped jeans and a vintage band t-shirt, the uniform of someone who didn't care about society's expectations. I could see why Emma was attracted to him, and that realization stung more than I wanted to admit. When they finished loading the truck, Emma came back inside alone. She found me still sitting at the kitchen table, still in my bathrobe, surrounded by the remnants of the celebration I'd planned that never happened. "Mom," she said softly, sitting down across from me. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she had bad dreams. "I'm sorry for what I said yesterday, about the nightmare thing. That was harsh." I looked up at her, this young woman I'd raised, this stranger who was leaving me behind. "Was it true, though? Is that really how you see me?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "Sometimes, yes. But I also know you love me. And I know you've sacrificed a lot for me. I just need you to understand that your dreams for me and my dreams for myself aren't the same thing." "I thought they were," I admitted. "I thought I was giving you everything I never had." "You did give me a lot," she said. "You gave me confidence and work ethic, and the belief that I could achieve anything I set my mind to. But Mom, you also gave me the pressure to achieve things that would make you proud, not necessarily things that would make me happy." Jake honked the horn outside, and Emma stood up. "I have to go. We're driving straight through to Portland." She hesitated, then leaned down and kissed my forehead. "I love you, Mom. I just need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be who you think I should be." And then she was gone, leaving me alone in a house that suddenly felt enormous and hollow. I sat there until evening, still in my bathrobe, still trying to process what had just happened. My daughter, my purpose, my entire reason for existing for the past 18 years, had just walked out of my life to pursue what she called her real passion, with a boy I barely knew. That night, I finally showered and got dressed, then sat down at my computer. I opened a new browser window and stared at the blank search bar. After a long moment, I typed in Jake Morrison, Portland, Oregon, and hit enter. If Emma thought she could just disappear into a new life without me having any say in the matter, she was wrong. If she wanted to call me a nightmare, then maybe it was time I showed her what nightmares were really made of. The search results were surprisingly extensive. Jake had a larger online presence than I'd expected. His Instagram account was public, filled with photos of food he'd cooked, adventures he'd taken, and recently, pictures of Emma looking happier than I'd seen her in months. His LinkedIn profile listed him as a culinary entrepreneur, despite having only a high school diploma and a few months of community college. There were articles in local Portland papers about young entrepreneurs, and Jake had been featured in one about innovative food truck concepts. I spent hours scrolling through his social media, taking screenshots, making notes. Jake Morrison wasn't just some directionless college dropout. He'd actually done his research, had a business plan, had secured investors for his food truck venture. He'd found a commissary kitchen where they could prep their food, had lined up spots at local farmers markets and festivals. The business actually looked legitimate, professionally planned, potentially successful. This realization should have made me feel better about Emma's choice, but instead it made me feel worse. It meant this wasn't some impulsive teenage rebellion. It meant she'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, while lying to me about her intentions. It meant when she'd been going through the motions of preparing for art school, accepting the scholarship, letting me celebrate her achievements, she'd already decided to throw it all away. But what bothered me most was reading through Jake's posts about Emma. He wrote about her with genuine admiration and love, talking about her creativity, her passion for cooking, her business sense. He posted pictures of elaborate meals she'd prepared, desserts she'd designed, creative presentations that honestly looked professional. In Jake's posts, Emma came across as talented, driven, and happy in ways I'd never seen before. Had I really been so blind to who my daughter actually was? Had I been so focused on pushing her toward my vision of her future that I'd missed her real talents and interests? The evidence was right there in dozens of photos and posts. Emma in a kitchen, flower in her hair, laughing as she decorated a wedding cake. Emma at a farmer's market, chatting with customers about locally sourced ingredients. Emma teaching Jake's younger sister how to make homemade pasta. I stayed up until 3 in the morning, diving deeper and deeper into their online presence. I found their business plan posted on a crowdfunding site where they were raising money for equipment. Emma's Eats was going to specialize in gourmet comfort food with a focus on locally sourced, sustainable ingredients. Their goal was to eventually open a brick-and-mortar restaurant. They'd already raised almost $8,000 from friends, family, and strangers who believed in their vision. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The crowdfunding page included a video of Emma and Jake explaining their concept. Watching Emma talk about her passion for cooking, seeing her eyes light up as she described her menu ideas, was like watching a different person. This wasn't the sometimes sullen, always stressed teenager who'd been living in my house. This was a confident young woman who knew exactly what she wanted and had the drive to achieve it. Food has always been my love language, Emma said in the video, standing next to Jake in what looked like his family's kitchen. I grew up thinking I had to choose a more traditional path, but I've realized that following your passion isn't irresponsible, it's essential. Jake and I want to create something that brings people together, that nourishes both body and soul. I slammed the laptop shut, anger and hurt warring in my chest. Following your passion isn't irresponsible? What about following through on commitments? What about gratitude for opportunities? What about not breaking your mother's heart after 18 years of devotion? The next morning, I called Emma's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later, then again that afternoon. Finally, that evening, she texted me back. Mom, I'm sorry, but I need some space right now. Jake and I are getting settled and starting our business. I'll call you in a few weeks when things calm down. A few weeks. My daughter was asking me to wait a few weeks to hear from her after dropping this bomb on our lives. The daughter I'd talked to every single day for 18 years, who'd never made a major decision without consulting me, now wanted space. I stared at that text message for a long time, and something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. Emma wanted to pursue her dreams? She wanted space? She wanted to call me a nightmare and then disappear into her new life like I didn't matter? Fine. If that's how she wanted to play this, I could play too. I opened my laptop again and navigated back to their crowdfunding page. The donation section was still open, and they were about $3,000 short of their goal. I clicked on the donor list and started scrolling through the names, looking for people I might know, people who might listen to reason if they knew the full story. There was Mrs. Patterson, Emma's high school art teacher. There was David Chen, our next-door neighbor. There was Sarah Williams, a girl Emma had been friends with since elementary school. And there were dozens of strangers, people who'd been moved by their video, their story, their dream. I clicked on Mrs. Patterson's profile and sent her a private message. Hi Linda, this is Claire Thompson, Emma's mother. I saw that you donated to Emma's crowdfunding campaign. I'm wondering if you have a few minutes to talk about Emma's situation. There are some things about her decision that I think you should know. Mrs. Patterson responded within an hour, giving me her phone number and suggesting we meet for coffee the next day. She'd always liked Emma, had written one of her recommendation letters for art school, and was surprised to hear she'd turned down her scholarship. I have to admit, I was confused when I saw Emma's business plan, Mrs. Patterson said when we met at our local coffee shop. Don't get me wrong, it looks impressive, but Emma has such extraordinary talent as a photographer. I've been teaching for 25 years, and I've rarely seen a student with her natural eye for composition and storytelling. That's exactly what I've been trying to tell her, I said, leaning forward across our small table. Linda, she's throwing away a full scholarship to one of the best art programs in the country. For a food truck. With a boy she's known less than a year. Mrs. Patterson frowned, stirring her latte thoughtfully. Has she always been interested in cooking? I mean, I know she took culinary arts as an elective, but I thought that was just for fun. It was for fun, I said firmly. She's never expressed any serious interest in cooking as a career until she met Jake. I think he's convinced her to abandon her real talents for this fantasy they've cooked up together. I paused, realizing the irony of my word choice. Linda, I'm worried she's making a huge mistake that will affect the rest of her life. And I'm worried that people who care about her are enabling this mistake by supporting their business plan. You think she's being manipulated? I chose my words carefully. I think she's young and in love and not thinking clearly. I think Jake has filled her head with romantic notions about being entrepreneurs together, and she's too infatuated to see the reality of what she's giving up. Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly. I have to say, when I got their crowdfunding request, I almost didn't donate. It seemed so sudden, so different from everything Emma had worked toward. But their business plan was really well thought out, and Emma seemed so passionate in their video. She's passionate about Jake, I corrected, not necessarily about the business. Linda, what would you think if I told you that Emma has been lying to me for months? That she was planning this behind my back while letting me believe she was excited about art school? That she announced her decision the day after getting her scholarship, in the cruelest way possible? Oh my, Mrs. Patterson said, her expression shifting from confused to concerned. I had no idea. That does change things considerably. We talked for another hour, and by the time we parted ways, Mrs. Patterson had agreed to reach out to Emma and encourage her to reconsider her decision. She also mentioned that she'd been planning to feature Emma's business in an article for the school newsletter, highlighting successful graduates, but now she wasn't sure that was appropriate. I felt a small spark of satisfaction as I drove home. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the next week, I had similar conversations with David Chen, Sarah Williams, and 3 other people who donated to Emma's campaign. I didn't lie to any of them, but I presented the situation in a way that highlighted Emma's impulsiveness, Jake's influence, and the tragedy of wasted potential. I talked about the sacrifices I'd made, the opportunities Emma was throwing away, the way she'd deceived me. Most people were sympathetic. They hadn't realized Emma was giving up a full scholarship. They hadn't known she'd been lying to her mother. They hadn't considered that maybe an 18-year-old wasn't mature enough to make such a life-changing decision. especially under the influence of a boyfriend. By the end of the week, I'd convinced 3 donors to request refunds from the crowdfunding platform. Sarah Williams, who'd contributed $500, sent Emma a message expressing her concerns about the decision and suggesting she defer art school for a year instead of giving up the scholarship entirely. But my real breakthrough came when I decided to research Jake's background more thoroughly. I spent an entire Saturday afternoon digging through public records, social media archives, and old news articles. What I found was interesting. Jake Morrison had a history of grandiose business ideas that never quite materialized. At 19, he'd started a mobile car detailing service that lasted 6 months. At 20, he'd tried to launch a freelance photography business that overlapped suspiciously with Emma's interests. At 21, he'd partnered with a friend to start a landscaping company that ended in a lawsuit over unpaid bills. The food truck wasn't Jake's first entrepreneurial venture. It was just his latest in a series of schemes that started with big dreams and ended with disappointment. And now he'd convinced my talented, naive daughter to abandon her future to fund his next failure. I compiled everything I'd found into a detailed document: Jake's failed businesses, the timeline of Emma's sudden career change, the concerning pattern of him pursuing ventures that aligned with his current girlfriend's interests. I sent copies to Mrs. Patterson, David Chen, and Emma's guidance counselor at her high school, along with a carefully worded email expressing my concerns about my daughter's judgment. But I didn't stop there. I created fake accounts on social media and left anonymous comments on their crowdfunding page, raising questions about Jake's business history and Emma's lack of culinary training. I posted on local Portland food blogs, questioning whether the market was oversaturated with food trucks and whether inexperienced operators were setting themselves up for failure. I told myself I was protecting Emma, saving her from a mistake that would haunt her for the rest of her life. I told myself that sometimes mothers had to make hard choices to protect their children, even when those children couldn't see the danger they were in. But late at night, when I lay awake in Emma's empty bedroom staring at the ceiling, I knew there was more to it than maternal protection. I was angry. Furious, actually. After 18 years of putting Emma first, of structuring my entire life around her needs and dreams, she'd called me a nightmare and walked away like I meant nothing. Well, if she wanted to see what a real nightmare looked like, I was just getting started. 3 weeks into my campaign against Emma's food truck dreams, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was Tuesday morning, and I was getting ready for my shift at the hospital when my phone rang with an unknown Portland number. "Hello, is this Claire Thompson?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Yes, this is Claire. Who is this?" "My name is Marcus Rivera. I'm a business consultant here in Portland, and I've been working with Jake Morrison and your daughter Emma on their food truck venture. I was wondering if we could have a conversation about some concerns that have been brought to my attention." My heart started racing. Had someone told Emma about my efforts to undermine her business? Had she figured out I was behind the negative comments and donor withdrawals? What kind of concerns? Well, it seems there's been some misinformation circulating about Jake's business background and Emma's qualifications. Some potential investors have reached out to me with questions, and I'd like to get to the bottom of where these concerns are coming from. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not sure what you mean. I don't know anything about Emma's business plans. She hasn't been in touch with me since she moved to Portland." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to be direct with you. I know you've been contacting people who donated to Emma's crowdfunding campaign. I know you've been spreading information about Jake's past business ventures. And I know you've been posting anonymous comments questioning their viability as entrepreneurs. The blood drained from my face. How could he possibly know all of that? I don't know what you're talking about. Mrs. Thompson, I specialize in helping young entrepreneurs protect their ventures from various threats, including family interference. Emma hired me specifically because she was concerned about potential sabotage from someone close to her. She didn't want to believe it was you, but the evidence is pretty clear." I sank onto my couch, my legs suddenly weak. Emma had hired someone to investigate me? My own daughter had suspected I would try to destroy her business and had taken preemptive action? That's ridiculous. I would never. You contacted Linda Patterson, David Chen, and Sarah Williams within a week of Emma's departure. You convinced 3 donors to request refunds. You created accounts under the names Jennifer Walsh and Susan Martinez to post negative comments on their crowdfunding page. You researched Jake's background and compiled a document about his previous ventures, which you then distributed to several people in Emma's network. Each fact he listed felt like a slap. He knew everything, had tracked every move I'd made. But how? And more importantly, what did Emma know? Does Emma know about this? I asked weakly. She knows someone has been actively working against her business. She knows that several of her supporters have withdrawn their backing after receiving concerning information about her decision. She doesn't know for certain that it's you, but she suspects. That's why she hired me. To spy on her own mother? To protect her business from interference, Marcus corrected. Mrs. Thompson, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen family members destroy their children's dreams out of spite, fear, or misguided love. What you're doing isn't uncommon, but it is harmful. I felt anger flare in my chest. Harmful? Do you know what's harmful? Watching your daughter throw away a full scholarship to one of the best art programs in the country for some fantasy food truck business with a boy who has a history of failed ventures. Do you know what's harmful? 18 years of sacrifice being dismissed as a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Ah, Marcus said, and I could hear understanding in his voice. There it is. This isn't really about protecting Emma from a bad business decision. This is about you feeling rejected and unappreciated. You don't know anything about our relationship, I snapped. I know that Emma is a talented young woman who's passionate about cooking and has the business sense to hire a consultant to protect her interests. I know that she's been successful in every venture she's undertaken, including raising over $10,000 from people who believe in her vision. And I know that her biggest obstacle right now isn't market competition or lack of capital. It's her own mother. The words hung between us like an accusation. What do you want from me? I want you to stop. Stop contacting Emma's supporters. Stop posting negative comments. Stop trying to sabotage her business. If you continue, I'll have no choice but to recommend that Emma pursue legal action against you for interference with business relationships. Legal action? Against her own mother? If necessary, yes. Mrs. Thompson, Emma loves you, but she's not going to let anyone, including family, destroy something she's worked hard to build. You have a choice to make. You can support your daughter, even if you don't agree with her decisions, or you can continue down this path and risk losing her entirely. The line went dead, leaving me sitting in stunned silence. Emma had hired a business consultant to protect herself from me. She'd suspected I would try to sabotage her dreams, and had taken steps to stop me. The daughter I'd raised to trust me, to come to me with her problems, to rely on my guidance, now saw me as a threat. I spent the rest of the day at work in a fog, going through the motions of caring for patients while my mind churned with everything Marcus had told me. During my lunch break, I called Emma's phone, desperate to hear her voice, to explain myself, to somehow repair the damage I'd done. The call went straight to voicemail, but this time there was a new message. Hi, you've reached Emma. I'm not taking calls right now, but if this is an emergency, please text me. Otherwise, I'll get back to you when I can. Not taking calls right now. Because of me. Because her own mother had become someone she needed to hide from. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I cooked dinner. Not just heated up a frozen meal or ordered takeout, but actually cooked. I made Emma's favorite pasta dish, the one I used to prepare for her birthday dinners, using the recipe that had been in my family for generations. As I stirred the sauce and tasted for seasoning, I remembered teaching Emma the same techniques when she was 10 years old. How excited she'd been to help. How proud she'd looked when I told her she was a natural. When had I stopped noticing Emma's passion for cooking? When had I decided that her interest in photography was more valuable, more worthy of encouragement? I thought back to high school, remembering now how Emma had often cooked dinner for us, experimenting with new recipes, asking for my opinion on flavor combinations. I'd always praised her efforts, but I'd also steered conversations back to her photography, to her art portfolio, to the future I'd envisioned for her. Had I been so focused on my own dreams for Emma that I'd ignored her actual interests? Had I really been as controlling and dismissive as Marcus suggested? The pasta dish turned out perfectly, but I had no appetite for it. Instead, I found myself scrolling through Emma's social media again, looking at her posts with new eyes. In photo after photo, she was cooking, baking, creating elaborate meals for friends and family. Her captions were full of passion and knowledge about ingredients, techniques, flavor profiles. How had I missed this? How had I convinced myself that cooking was just a hobby when the evidence of her expertise was right there? I found a video she'd posted 6 months ago, long before she'd met Jake, where she was teaching her friend Sarah how to make homemade bread. Emma's enthusiasm was infectious as she explained the science behind yeast activation, the importance of kneading technique, the way to tell when dough had risen properly. She wasn't just following a recipe. She understood the fundamental principles of baking in a way that spoke to real talent and dedication. The video had dozens of comments from friends praising Emma's teaching ability and asking for more cooking tutorials. Several people had begged her to start a food blog or YouTube channel. One comment, from a classmate named Rachel, stood out. "Emma, you should seriously consider culinary school. You're better than most professional chefs I know." Emma had responded, "Thanks. I'd love to pursue cooking professionally someday, but my mom has other plans for me. Maybe after college I can figure out how to make it work." I stared at that comment for a long time. Emma had wanted to pursue cooking professionally, but she'd felt constrained by my expectations. She'd been planning to sacrifice her own dreams to fulfill mine, until Jake came along and gave her the courage to choose herself. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't protecting Emma from a mistake. I was the mistake she was trying to escape from. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Jake Morrison. I think we need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow evening? I'll be in Seattle for a supplier meeting." Jake wanted to meet me. Emma's boyfriend, the young man I'd been systematically trying to destroy, was driving 3 hours to have a conversation with me. Part of me wanted to ignore the message, to maintain the distance and antagonism that had developed between us. But another part of me, the part that was beginning to understand how badly I'd misread the situation, knew I owed him at least a conversation. I texted back, yes. Where and when? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown the next evening. I spent the entire day anxious and defensive, preparing arguments about Emma's wasted potential and Jake's history of failed businesses. But when I saw him sitting in a corner booth, looking younger and more vulnerable than he appeared in his social media photos, my prepared speeches evaporated. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, standing to shake my hand, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "You can call me Claire," I said, settling into the booth across from him. Up close, Jake looked tired, stressed in a way that reminded me of myself during Emma's high school years, when I was working overtime to save for her college expenses. "I'll get right to the point," Jake said, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup that looked like it had gone cold hours ago. "Emma is miserable. She's trying to hide it because she doesn't want to admit that this situation with you is affecting her, but it's destroying her. She cries every night, Claire. She misses you so much it's making her physically sick." The words hit me harder than any accusation could have. "She misses me? Of course she misses you. You're her mother. You've been the most important person in her life for 18 years. Did you really think she could just walk away and be fine?" Jake leaned forward, his expression earnest. "She loves you, Claire. But she's also terrified of you." "Terrified? That's ridiculous." "Is it? You've spent the last month systematically trying to destroy everything she's working toward. You've turned her friends against her, sabotaged her funding, spread rumors about her judgment and my character. How is she supposed to feel safe reaching out to you when you've proven that you'll hurt her if she doesn't do what you want?" I felt tears building in my eyes. I was trying to protect her. She's making a huge mistake. "According to who?" Jake asked gently. "According to you? Claire, have you actually looked at what Emma has accomplished in the last month? Have you seen her business plan, her financial projections, her supplier contracts? I saw your crowdfunding page, I said defensively. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Emma has been working 18-hour days building this business. She's secured contracts with 3 farmers markets, lined up catering gigs for 2 weddings, and developed relationships with local suppliers who are giving us wholesale prices because they believe in our concept. She's created a menu that balances creativity with profitability, and she's designed systems for inventory management, cost control, and quality assurance. Jake pulled out his phone and showed me a spreadsheet that made my head spin with its complexity and detail. This is Emma's work, not mine. I'm good at the cooking and customer service side of things, but Emma is the business mind behind our operation. She's brilliant, Claire. Absolutely brilliant. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. The spreadsheet was more sophisticated than anything I'd created in my nursing career, full of formulas and projections that spoke to genuine business acumen. She did this herself? She taught herself financial modeling by watching YouTube videos and reading business books. She learned about food service regulations by studying state health department websites. She figured out our supply chain by calling dozens of vendors and negotiating terms. Jake's pride in Emma was evident in every word. Your daughter isn't some naive teenager following her boyfriend's dreams. She's an entrepreneur with a vision and the skills to execute it. But the scholarship, I said weakly. Art school. Photography. She was so talented. She is talented. At a lot of things. But her passion is food, Claire. It always has been. She chose photography because she thought it would make you proud. But it was never what she wanted for herself. The truth of that statement settled over me like a weight. I thought about all the times Emma had seemed restless during photography sessions. How she'd perked up when we'd discussed her part-time job at a local restaurant. How she'd always been more excited about planning menus for family gatherings than about her art portfolio. I've ruined everything, I whispered. Not everything, Jake said softly. But you've made things harder than they needed to be. Emma is succeeding in spite of your interference, not because of it. She's proving that she can build something amazing, even when the person she loves most is working against her. I looked up at Jake, really seeing him for the first time. Not the college dropout who was stealing my daughter away, but the young man who was supporting Emma's dreams in ways I never had. She hired Marcus to investigate me. That was my idea, Jake admitted. Emma kept making excuses for the donors who were backing out, the negative comments, the people who suddenly had concerns about our business. She didn't want to believe that you were behind it, but I've seen this kind of family sabotage before, with my own sister when she decided not to go to law school. I convinced Emma to hire Marcus to document what was happening so we could protect ourselves if needed. Are you going to sue me? Jake shook his head. We don't want to sue you, Claire. We want you to be part of Emma's life. But that can only happen if you can accept that she's an adult who gets to make her own choices, even if those choices aren't what you would have chosen for her. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the conversation settling between us. Finally, Jake spoke again. Emma wants to call you. She's been drafting texts and deleting them for weeks. She misses talking to you about her day, asking for your advice, sharing her excitement about what she's building. But she's afraid that if she reaches out, you'll see it as an opening to convince her to give up everything she's worked for. What can I do? I asked, feeling helpless. How do I fix this? Stop trying to fix her, Jake said simply. She's not broken. Her dreams aren't wrong just because they're different from what you imagined. Start by acknowledging that you've been trying to sabotage her business, and apologize for it. Then ask her to tell you about what she's building, and actually listen. Show her that you can support her choices even when they scare you. What if she fails? The question came out as a whisper. Then, she fails, Jake said with a shrug. And she learns from it and tries again. That's what young adults do, Claire. They take risks, make mistakes, figure out who they are through trial and error. Your job as her mother isn't to prevent her from ever failing. It's to love her regardless of whether she succeeds or fails. After Jake left, I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, replaying our conversation and trying to process everything I'd learned. Emma wasn't a naive teenager being manipulated by her boyfriend. She was a capable young woman building something meaningful with a partner who respected her abilities. I'd been so focused on protecting her from what I perceived as a mistake that I'd become the obstacle she needed protection from. The next morning, I did something I should have done weeks earlier. I called Emma's phone, and when it went to voicemail, I left a message. "Emma, it's Mom. I know you're not taking calls right now, and I understand why. I owe you an apology for so many things, but mostly for not trusting you to know what's best for your own life. I've been scared and hurt, and I've handled this situation badly. Very badly. I'd like a chance to make things right, if you're willing. I love you, and I miss you more than I can express. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here." I hung up and immediately started composing a longer message, an email where I could fully explain myself and ask for forgiveness. But before I could finish typing, my phone rang. "Mom?" Emma's voice was small, uncertain, but it was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in weeks. "Emma. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry." "Are you really?" she asked, and I could hear years of hurt in those two words. "Yes, I am so sorry. For trying to sabotage your business. For not trusting your judgment. For making you feel like you had to choose between your dreams and my love. You should never have had to make that choice." Emma was quiet for a long moment, and I held my breath, terrified that I'd lost her forever. Finally, she spoke. "Mom, I need you to understand something. I love cooking. I love the creativity, the science, the way food brings people together. I love the business side of it too, the planning, and problem solving and building something from scratch. This isn't a phase or a rebellion. This is who I am." "I know," I said, and for the first time in weeks I meant it completely. "I talked to Jake yesterday. He showed me your business plan, told me about everything you've accomplished. Emma, I had no idea how talented you are at this. I'm so proud of what you've built." "You are?" The hope in her voice nearly broke my heart. "I am. And I'm ashamed that it took talking to your boyfriend to make me see what I should have noticed years ago. You've always been passionate about cooking. I just wasn't paying attention to the right things." We talked for over an hour, with Emma telling me about her suppliers, her menu development, her plans for growth. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself genuinely excited about her business in ways I'd never been about her photography. This was Emma in her element, talking about something she understood deeply and cared about passionately. "I have a question," I said as our conversation wound down. "Would you be willing to let me invest in your business? Not as a way to control you or have a say in your decisions, but as a genuine investment because I believe in what you're building?" Emma was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Mom, you don't have to do that. I know you've been saving for retirement." "Emma, I've been saving for your future. Your real future. Not the one I imagined for you. If this business is your future, then I want to be part of making it successful." "How much were you thinking?" she asked cautiously. "How much do you need?" Another long pause. "We could use about $15,000 for equipment upgrades and operating capital." "But Mom, if you invest, I need to know it's because you genuinely support what we're doing, not because you're trying to buy your way back into my life." "It's because I love you," I said, "and because I finally understand that loving you means supporting your dreams, not mine." 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Portland. Emma had invited me to visit, to see the commercial kitchen where they were preparing for their launch, to taste the menu they'd developed, to meet the team they'd assembled. I was nervous, but it was a different kind of nervousness than I'd felt in months. This was the anticipation of meeting my daughter as an adult, of seeing her in her element, of building a new relationship based on respect rather than control. Jake picked me up at the airport, and the drive to their kitchen was filled with easy conversation about the business, the city, Emma's excitement about my visit. He was warmer and more relaxed than he'd been at our coffee shop meeting, and I realized that my acceptance of their relationship had lifted a burden from his shoulders too. When we arrived at the commissary kitchen, Emma was there waiting, wearing chef's whites and a nervous smile. She looked older somehow, more confident and self-assured than I'd ever seen her. But when she hugged me, she was still my little girl, and I held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with the new aromas of garlic and herbs that clung to her clothes. "Welcome to Emma's Eats," she said, gesturing around the professional kitchen that was clearly her domain. "Are you ready for a tasting?" For the next 2 hours, Emma and Jake walked me through their entire operation. They showed me their prep systems, their quality control processes, their supplier relationships. Emma presented each dish with the kind of technical knowledge and artistic sensibility that reminded me why I'd always thought she was destined for greatness, just in a different field than I'd imagined. The food was extraordinary. Not just good, but restaurant quality amazing. Emma had created a menu that was both comforting and sophisticated, accessible but creative. Watching her taste and adjust seasonings, explaining the inspiration behind each dish, I saw the same passion and dedication she'd once brought to photography, but magnified tenfold. "Emma," I said as we finished the tasting, "this is incredible. You're not just talented at this, you're exceptional." She beamed, and for the first time in months there was no tension between us. "Thanks, Mom. That means everything to me." As we cleaned up the kitchen together, I watched Emma and Jake work as a team, communicating effortlessly, supporting each other's strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. They weren't just romantic partners. They were genuine business partners with complementary skills and shared vision. "I owe you an apology, too," I said to Jake as we loaded the dishwasher. "I judged you unfairly, made assumptions about your character and your intentions." "I'm sorry. I understand why you were protective," he replied. "If I had a daughter like Emma, I'd probably be suspicious of any guy who wanted to marry her, too." "Marry her?" I looked up sharply. Jake's face turned red. "I mean, hypothetically, in the future. We're not." "I haven't." Emma laughed, bumping his shoulder with hers. "Mom, relax. We're not getting married tomorrow. But yes, we've talked about it. In a few years, when the business is stable and we've figured out our lives a little better." I felt a familiar panic start to rise in my chest, then forced myself to breathe deeply. Emma was an adult. If she wanted to marry Jake someday, that was her choice to make. And based on what I'd seen today, it wouldn't be a bad choice. That evening, Emma and Jake took me to dinner at one of Portland's top restaurants, where Emma knew the chef and could point out techniques and flavor combinations that inspired her own cooking. Listening to her analyze the food with the expertise of a professional, I realized that this wasn't a young woman playing at being a chef. This was someone who understood her craft deeply and was building genuine expertise. "Mom," Emma said as we walked back to their apartment, "I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, even when I was angry. And I never stopped wanting your approval. It just hurt too much when I realized I couldn't be the person you wanted me to be." "You're exactly the person I want you to be," I said, taking her hand. "I just had to learn to see you clearly." As I prepared to fly home the next day, Emma handed me a gift bag. Inside was a cookbook she'd been working on, filled with recipes from our family and new creations she'd developed for the business. The dedication read, "To Mom, who taught me that food is love, even when I forgot to listen." "Emma," I said, tears welling in my eyes, "when did you become so wise?" "I had a good teacher," she said, hugging me tight. "You just had to learn to trust your own lessons." The flight home gave me time to reflect on everything that had changed in the past month. I'd started this journey convinced that I was protecting my daughter from a terrible mistake. I'd ended it understanding that the only mistake had been my failure to see her clearly, to trust her judgment, to support her dreams instead of imposing my own. But more than that, I'd learned something about myself. For 18 years, I'd defined my identity through Emma's achievements, her potential, her future. I'd been so focused on living vicariously through her success that I'd forgotten to build a life of my own. No wonder Emma had felt suffocated. I'd been treating her like the fulfillment of my own unrealized dreams, instead of supporting her in realizing hers. When I got home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I signed up for a cooking class, not because I wanted to compete with Emma or insert myself into her passion, but because I'd rediscovered my own long-dormant interest in food. Watching Emma cook had reminded me of how much I'd enjoyed experimenting in the kitchen before life became all about work and single motherhood and college planning. 3 months later, Emma called to tell me that their food truck had been so successful that they were already planning to expand to a second location. She also told me that several food critics had visited, and one had written a review calling Emma's eats a revelation and predicting that Emma would be, quote, one of Portland's rising culinary stars. "I'm so proud of you," I told her, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "Thanks, Mom. And hey, I have some news. Jake and I want to come visit next month. We're thinking about expanding to Seattle eventually, and we want to scout some locations." "That would be wonderful," I said. "I'll cook for you." Emma laughed. "Mom, you don't have to cook for the chef." "I want to. I've been taking cooking classes, and I have some new recipes I'd love to try out on my favorite food critic." "Really? Mom, that's amazing. I can't wait to see what you've been learning." As we hung up, I realized that Emma coming home wouldn't be the return of my wayward daughter to the life I'd planned for her. It would be a visit between two adults who respected each other's choices and celebrated each other's growth. It had taken losing her to learn how to truly love her, but now our relationship was stronger than it had ever been. I had called Emma's dreams a nightmare and tried to make them disappear. In the end, the only thing that disappeared was my own blindness to who my daughter really was and what she was capable of achieving. 6 months after my visit to Portland, I thought our family had finally found peace. Emma's business was thriving, our relationship had healed, and I'd started building my own life beyond being just her mother. That peace shattered on a rainy Tuesday morning when I received a call that would turn everything upside down again. "Claire Thompson?" The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes, this is Claire. This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Portland Police Bureau. I'm calling about your daughter, Emma Morrison." My blood turned to ice. "What's happened? Is she hurt?" "No, ma'am, she's not hurt. But we need to speak with you about some serious allegations that have been made. Can you come to Portland as soon as possible?" "Allegations? What kind of allegations?" "I'd prefer to discuss this in person. How soon can you be here?" I was on a plane to Portland that afternoon, my mind racing with possibilities. Had there been an accident with the food truck? A health code violation? Something involving Jake? The detective had been deliberately vague, which only made my anxiety worse. Emma met me at the airport, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she'd aged years in the months since I'd seen her, stress lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Mom, I'm so glad you're here," she said, hugging me tightly. "This is such a mess." "What's going on, sweetheart?" The detective wouldn't tell me anything over the phone. Emma took a shaky breath as we walked toward baggage claim. "Someone has accused me of stealing recipes and trade secrets from my former employer. They're saying I built my entire business on stolen intellectual property. That's ridiculous. Your recipes are original, family recipes, and your own creations." That's what I thought too. But apparently, someone has provided evidence that suggests otherwise. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "Mom, they're talking about criminal charges. Theft of trade secrets is a felony." We drove to the police station in tense silence, Emma's hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. I couldn't understand how this was happening. I'd seen Emma develop her recipes, watched her creative process, tasted her original dishes. How could anyone claim she'd stolen them? Detective Chen was a woman in her 40s, with kind eyes but a serious demeanor. She led us into a conference room where Jake was already waiting with a lawyer I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Thompson, thank you for coming. I know this is difficult, but we need to get to the bottom of these allegations." Detective Chen opened a thick file folder. 3 days ago, we received a complaint from Bella Vista Restaurant Group claiming that Emma stole proprietary recipes and cooking techniques while she was employed at their flagship restaurant 2 years ago. "That's impossible," I said immediately. Emma worked there part-time as a prep cook for 3 months. She wasn't even involved in recipe development. According to the complaint, Emma had access to their recipe database and secretly photographed proprietary information with the intention of using it in her own business ventures. Detective Chen slid several printed photographs across the table. These were allegedly taken by Emma during her employment. I stared at the photos in shock. They showed handwritten recipe cards, detailed cooking instructions, and plating techniques. The handwriting looked like Emma's, and some of the dishes were similar to items on her current menu. "Emma, I said, turning to my daughter. What is this? Emma's face was flushed with anger and humiliation. Those aren't stolen recipes, Mom. Those are my own notes from when I was learning techniques at Bella Vista. Chef Rodriguez encouraged all the prep cooks to take notes and practice recipes at home. I was trying to learn, not steal. The problem, the lawyer interjected, is that Bella Vista is claiming these specific dishes are proprietary creations that Emma couldn't have developed independently. They're saying the similarities between her current menu and their recipes are too close to be coincidental. Detective Chen pulled out another set of documents. We also have testimony from a former coworker who claims Emma talked about starting her own restaurant and using what she learned at Bella Vista as the foundation. Of course I talked about starting my own restaurant, Emma said, her voice rising. Every cook dreams of opening their own place. That doesn't mean I was planning to steal recipes. Emma, I need you to stay calm, the lawyer warned. Getting defensive won't help us here. I studied the photographs more carefully, my nurse's training kicking in to help me analyze details objectively. Something felt wrong about this whole situation. The timing was too convenient, the allegations too perfectly crafted to damage Emma's reputation and business. Detective Chen, I said, who filed this complaint? And why now, when Emma's business has been operating successfully for months? The complaint was filed by Marcus Rodriguez, the head chef at Bella Vista's flagship location. As for the timing, he claims he only recently became aware of Emma's business and recognized the stolen recipes. The name hit me like a physical blow. Marcus Rodriguez. Not Marcus Rivera, the business consultant who had confronted me about sabotaging Emma's crowdfunding campaign. But the similarity was too striking to be coincidental. Can I see the complaint form? I asked. Detective Chen hesitated, then slid the document across the table. I scanned it quickly, looking for details that might give me insight into the complainant's motivations. What I found made my stomach drop. Emma, I said quietly, does Chef Rodriguez have any connection to Marcus Rivera, the consultant you hired to investigate my interference with your business? I don't think so. Why? I pointed to a line on the complaint form. According to this, Marcus Rodriguez contacted the police after receiving information about your business from a concerned party who wished to remain anonymous. Someone told him about your success and suggested he investigate whether you'd stolen his recipes. The lawyer leaned forward, interested. That's an important detail. If someone else initiated this complaint by providing information to Rodriguez, it suggests this might not be a good faith allegation. But who would do that? Emma asked. Who would want to destroy my business? I had a sick feeling I knew exactly who, but I needed more information before making accusations. Detective Chen, is there any way we can find out who this anonymous source was? We're looking into it, but it may take some time. In the meantime, we need to complete our investigation of the theft allegations themselves. The interview continued for another hour, with Emma explaining her creative process, the origins of her recipes, and her employment history. By the end, I could see that Detective Chen was beginning to have doubts about the validity of the complaint, but the investigation would continue. As we left the police station, I pulled Emma aside. Sweetheart, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Is there any truth to these allegations? Any recipe or technique that you might have adapted from your time at Bella Vista? Emma looked hurt that I'd even asked. Mom, no. Absolutely not. Some of my techniques are similar, because that's how professional cooking works. There are standard methods for making sauces, preparing proteins, plating dishes. But my recipes are my own creations. I believe you, I said, squeezing her hand. But I also think I know who's behind this, and it's not really about the recipes. Back at Emma's apartment, I sat down with her and Jake to share my suspicions. I think Jason Whitmore is involved in this somehow. Who's Jason Whitmore? Emma asked. I explained about the business rivalry I'd read about during my research months ago, the pattern of failed ventures and questionable dealings. Jason was targeting companies in the food and hospitality industry, trying to acquire them through various schemes. When his plan to manipulate your relationship with me didn't work, he might have moved to plan B. But why would he care about our little food truck business? Jake asked. Because it's not little anymore, I said. You've been so successful that you're expanding, getting media attention, building a brand. If Jason is trying to establish himself in the Portland food scene, Emma's Eats represents competition. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. So you think he found out about my employment at Bella Vista and convinced Chef Rodriguez to file a false complaint? I think it's possible. The timing is too convenient, and the anonymous source details suggest someone was actively working to create this problem for you. Jake pulled out his laptop and started searching for information about Jason Whitmore's current business activities. Look at this, he said after a few minutes. Jason just announced plans to launch a, quote, premium food truck collective in Portland. He's been recruiting established food truck operators to join his brand. And if he can't recruit them, I said grimly, maybe he's trying to eliminate the competition. We spent the next several hours researching Jason's business activities and trying to find connections between him and Marcus Rodriguez. What we discovered was a complex web of business relationships and financial dealings that suggested Jason had been working to establish himself in Portland's food scene for months. This is insane, Emma said, rubbing her temples. You're telling me that some businessman I've never met is trying to destroy my reputation because he sees my food truck as competition? It's more than that, I said. Jason has a history of aggressive business tactics. He doesn't just want to compete with you, he wants to acquire your business or destroy it entirely. The next morning, I called Marcus Rivera, the business consultant who had helped Emma protect herself from my sabotage. If anyone would know how to investigate Jason's involvement in this situation, it would be him. Claire, Marcus said when I explained the situation, I'm not surprised. After our interactions regarding your daughter's business, I did some additional research on Jason Whitmore. He's been involved in several questionable schemes targeting small businesses in the Pacific Northwest. Can you help us prove his involvement in this complaint? I can try. Give me 24 hours to make some calls and see what I can uncover. While we waited for Marcus to investigate, Emma tried to maintain normal business operations, but the stress was taking its toll. She was snapping at Jake, second-guessing every decision, and losing the confident energy that had driven her success. Emma, I said as we sat in her kitchen that evening, you can't let this destroy what you've built. Whatever Jason's game is, we'll figure it out and stop it. What if we can't? She asked, tears streaming down her face. What if I end up with a criminal record? What if no one will ever trust me again? What if I really did subconsciously copy something from Bella Vista and I don't remember? I took her hands in mine, remembering all the times I'd comforted her as a child when she was frightened or overwhelmed. Emma, I've watched you create every recipe on your menu. I've seen your creative process, your attention to detail, your commitment to originality. You are not a thief, and anyone who really knows you understands that. But what if that's not enough? Then we fight harder. We find the truth, and we expose whoever is trying to hurt you. You've built something beautiful here, Emma. Don't let anyone take that away from you. The next day, Marcus called with news that was both encouraging and disturbing. I found the connection, he said. Jason Whitmore has been paying Marcus Rodriguez as a, quote, culinary consultant for his food truck collective project. Rodriguez has been helping him evaluate potential competitors and develop strategies to either recruit them or eliminate them. So Rodriguez filed a false complaint on Jason's behalf? It's more complicated than that. Rodriguez genuinely believes Emma stole his recipes, but only because Jason provided him with carefully selected information designed to support that conclusion. Jason showed him photos of Emma's dishes alongside similar dishes from Bella Vista, highlighted the similarities, and suggested that Emma couldn't have developed such sophisticated techniques on her own. He manipulated Rodriguez into filing the complaint. Exactly. Rodriguez isn't malicious, he's been deceived. But proving that in a way that will hold up legally is going to be challenging. Marcus had more information that painted an even darker picture of Jason's activities. I also discovered that Jason has been systematically targeting successful small food businesses throughout the Pacific Northwest. He identifies promising operations, then uses various tactics to force them to sell to him at below-market prices. Sometimes it's financial pressure, sometimes it's reputation damage, sometimes it's legal harassment. Like what he's doing to Emma. Emma's situation fits his pattern perfectly. He started by trying to use family conflict to destabilize her business. When that didn't work because you reconciled, he moved to Plan B, which is false accusations designed to damage her reputation and create legal expenses she can't afford. I felt a familiar anger building in my chest, but this time it wasn't directed at Emma or Jake. This time it was focused on someone who truly deserved it. What can we do to stop him? We need to gather evidence of his manipulation and present it to the police. But more importantly, we need to do it quickly before he escalates to Plan C. There's a Plan C? There's always a Plan C with people like Jason. If reputation damage doesn't work, he'll move to more direct sabotage. Equipment failures, health code violations, supplier problems. He'll make it impossible for Emma to operate her business. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done since my early days of sabotaging Emma's crowdfunding campaign. I became a detective. But this time, instead of working to destroy my daughter's dreams, I was fighting to protect them. I started by researching every business Jason had targeted in the past 2 years, looking for patterns in his methods, and identifying people who might be willing to testify about his tactics. I found 3 other food truck operators who had been approached by Jason's collective after experiencing mysterious problems with their businesses. One owner, a woman named Lisa Chen, who operated a Korean fusion truck in Seattle, agreed to speak with me over the phone. "Jason Whitmore destroyed my business," she said bluntly. "First, I started getting complaints about my food that I knew were fake. Then my suppliers began having, quote, inventory problems that meant I couldn't get ingredients. Finally, someone filed a complaint with the health department, claiming I'd made them sick. Were any of the complaints legitimate? Not one. But by the time I proved that, I'd lost half my regular customers and spent my savings on legal fees. Jason showed up 2 weeks later with an offer to buy my truck and recipes for a fraction of what they were worth. When I refused, the harassment escalated until I finally had to shut down." Lisa's story was nearly identical to what was happening to Emma, just at a more advanced stage. It confirmed that Jason was following a playbook, and it gave me insight into what we could expect if we didn't stop him quickly. I found similar stories from 2 other business owners, both of whom had eventually sold to Jason rather than continue fighting his systematic harassment. Armed with this information, I called Detective Chen and requested another meeting. "Detective, I believe I have evidence that the complaint against my daughter is part of a larger pattern of business harassment and fraud." I presented everything I'd gathered, the connection between Jason and Marcus Rodriguez, the testimonies from other business owners, the timeline of Jason's activities in Portland. Detective Chen listened carefully, taking notes and asking detailed questions. "This is compelling information, Mrs. Thompson, but proving that Jason Whitmore orchestrated a false complaint is still going to be difficult. We need direct evidence of his involvement." "What kind of evidence?" "Communications between him and Rodriguez discussing the complaint. Financial records showing payments related to the false accusations. Something that directly links him to the fraudulent allegations against Emma." I left the police station feeling frustrated but determined. If Jason thought he could destroy my daughter's business using lies and manipulation, he was about to learn that he'd picked the wrong family to target. That evening, I sat down with Emma and Jake to plan our next moves. We needed to find direct evidence of Jason's involvement, while also protecting Emma's business from further attacks. "I have an idea," Jake said suddenly. "What if we approach Marcus Rodriguez directly? If he's been manipulated by Jason, maybe we can convince him to tell us the truth about how this complaint really started." "That's risky," I said. "If Rodriguez is working with Jason knowingly, approaching him could make things worse. But if he's been deceived, like Marcus Rivera suggested, then showing him the evidence we've gathered might change his mind." Emma was quiet for several minutes, considering the options. Finally, she spoke. "I want to talk to him, not to confront him, but to understand what he thinks I did wrong. If I can address his concerns directly, maybe we can resolve this without it going to court." Against my better judgment, We arranged a meeting with Marcus Rodriguez at a neutral location, a small cafe near Bella Vista, where he often had coffee after his shifts. Jake and I waited at a nearby table while Emma approached him alone. I watched nervously as Emma introduced herself and asked if she could sit down. Rodriguez looked surprised and wary, but he agreed to listen. For the next 30 minutes, Emma spoke earnestly with him, showing him photos of her creative process, explaining the origins of her recipes, and answering his questions about her time at Bella Vista. Gradually, I could see Rodriguez's posture changing from defensive to confused to concerned. He started asking Emma questions that suggested he was beginning to doubt the information he'd been given about her alleged theft. Finally, Rodriguez pulled out his phone and showed Emma something on the screen. Even from across the cafe, I could see Emma's face go pale, then flush with anger. She said something sharp to Rodriguez, then returned to our table with a grim expression. "What happened?" I asked. Rodriguez showed me the photos that convinced him I'd stolen his recipes. They weren't just pictures of my dishes next to similar dishes from Bella Vista. Someone had doctored the images to make the similarities look more obvious than they actually are. Doctored how? They took photos of my food and adjusted the plating, the garnishes, even the lighting to make them look identical to Bella Vista's presentations. Then they put them side by side as, quote, evidence that I'd copied the recipes. Jake leaned forward, alarmed. Who showed him these photos? Jason Whitmore. Rodriguez has been working with him for 2 months, and Jason presented this, quote, evidence as proof that I was stealing proprietary recipes to build my business. Does Rodriguez believe you now? I think so. He's going to review the original photos and compare them to the doctored versions. If he can see the manipulation, he's willing to withdraw his complaint. This was the breakthrough we needed, but I knew Jason wouldn't give up easily. If his plan to use false accusations was falling apart, he'd move to more direct methods of sabotage. We need to be prepared for escalation, I warned Emma and Jake. If Jason realizes that Rodriguez is backing down, he'll try something else. I was right to be concerned. 2 days later, Emma called me in tears. Mom, they're shutting us down. The health department received an anonymous complaint, claiming we served contaminated food at yesterday's lunch service. They're requiring us to close immediately pending a full investigation. I caught the next flight to Portland, my mind racing with plans to fight this latest attack. But when I arrived at Emma's apartment, I found her sitting at her kitchen table with a bottle of wine and a look of defeated exhaustion. I can't do this anymore, Mom, she said without looking up. Every time we solve one problem, Jason creates 2 more. He has more money, more resources, more connections than we do. He's going to keep attacking until we give up or go bankrupt. Emma, you can't let him win. You've worked too hard to give up now. Have I, though? Maybe I should have just taken the scholarship and become a photographer like you wanted. At least then, I wouldn't be facing criminal charges and business closure and public humiliation. The defeat in her voice broke my heart. This was exactly what Jason wanted, to break Emma's spirit so completely that she'd walk away from everything she'd built. Emma, look at me, I said, kneeling beside her chair. Do you remember what you told me when I was trying to sabotage your business? You said that following your passion wasn't irresponsible, it was essential. You were right then, and you're right now. But what if passion isn't enough? What if Jason is just stronger than we are? Then we get stronger. We find allies, we gather evidence, we fight smarter instead of harder. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus Rivera. Marcus, we need your help. Jason has escalated to health department complaints, and I think Emma is about to give up. Marcus agreed to meet us immediately, and within an hour he was sitting at Emma's kitchen table with his laptop and a determination that reminded me of my own protective instincts. Jason made a mistake with the health department complaint, Marcus said, scrolling through documents on his screen. He filed it using an anonymous tip service, but the timing and specific details in the complaint create a pattern that we can trace back to him. How? The complaint mentions specific dishes served at specific times yesterday, information that only someone who is monitoring Emma's business closely would know. Jason's been having Emma's operation surveilled, and he got careless with the details he included in his complaint. Marcus showed us security footage from a nearby building that captured Jason's surveillance team, photographing Emma's food truck during yesterday's lunch service. The timestamp on the footage was less than an hour before the health department complaint was filed. This is direct evidence of Jason's involvement, Marcus said. Combined with Rodriguez's testimony about the doctored photos and the pattern of harassment we've documented, we have enough to take to the authorities. But before we could act on this evidence, Jason made his biggest mistake yet. The next morning, he showed up at Emma's commissary kitchen unannounced, accompanied by two men in expensive suits. "Emma Morrison?" he said, extending his hand with a practiced smile. "I'm Jason Whitmore. I think it's time we had a conversation about your future in the food service industry." Emma stared at him without taking his hand. "I know who you are and I know what you've been doing to my business." Jason's smile faltered slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I think there's been some misunderstanding. I'm here to offer you a solution to your current legal and regulatory problems. By destroying my reputation and then offering to buy my business for pennies on the dollar, by offering you a fair market value for your recipes and equipment, plus a management position in my food truck collective. You're talented, Emma, but you're in over your head. Let me help you salvage something from this situation before it gets worse." What Jason didn't know was that Jake was in the storage room behind the kitchen, recording the entire conversation on his phone. As Jason continued his pitch, he inadvertently confirmed his involvement in the recipe theft allegations, the health department complaint, and the systematic campaign to damage Emma's business. "You see," Jason said, his tone becoming more condescending, "small operators like you don't understand how competitive this industry really is. Without proper backing and protection, businesses like yours are vulnerable to all sorts of problems: regulatory issues, supplier complications, reputation damage. It's really quite easy to create problems for someone who doesn't know how to protect themselves." "Are you threatening me?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. "Not threatening. Just explaining reality. But those problems can go away just as easily as they appeared, if you're willing to be reasonable about accepting my offer." Emma looked Jason directly in the eyes. "Get out of my kitchen and stay away from my business." Jason's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "You're making a mistake, Emma. I've been trying to be generous, but my patience has limits. You have 48 hours to reconsider my offer before your problems become much more serious." As soon as Jason left, Jake emerged from the storage room with his phone. "Please tell me you got all of that?" Emma said. "Every word," Jake replied grimly. "Including his direct admission that he created your problems and his threat to make them worse if you don't sell to him. We immediately took the recording to Detective Chen, along with all the other evidence Marcus had gathered. The combination of Jason's recorded confession and the documented pattern of harassment was finally enough for the authorities to take action. Within 24 hours, Jason Whitmore was arrested on charges of extortion, fraud, and conspiracy to interfere with business operations. The health department complaint was withdrawn after investigators determined it was fraudulent, and Marcus Rodriguez formally retracted his recipe theft allegations after seeing evidence of the photo manipulation. But the victory felt hollow. Emma's business had been damaged by weeks of negative publicity and forced closures. Several regular customers had stopped coming, spooked by the allegations and health scares. The legal costs and lost revenue had depleted their savings and put their expansion plans on hold. "We won," Emma said as we sat in her apartment the night after Jason's arrest, "but it doesn't feel like winning." "Why not?" "Because he still succeeded in hurting us. Even though everyone knows now that his allegations were false, some people will always wonder if there was truth to them, and we've lost so much momentum that it might take years to recover." I understood her frustration, but I also saw something she didn't. "Emma, you didn't just survive Jason's attacks. You proved that your business is worth fighting for. You showed your community that you have integrity and determination, and you demonstrated that small businesses can stand up to bullies and win. But at what cost? At the cost of learning how strong you really are. and how many people believe in you and what you're building. As if to prove my point, Emma's phone started buzzing with notifications. Word of Jason's arrest and the truth about his harassment campaign had spread through Portland's food community, and the response was overwhelming. Other food truck operators were offering to share prime locations with Emma's Eats. Local restaurants were proposing collaboration opportunities. Food bloggers and critics were requesting interviews to help restore Emma's reputation. Most surprisingly, several of Jason's previous victims, including Lisa Chen from Seattle, were reaching out to offer support and partnership opportunities. They had bonded over their shared experience of surviving Jason's attacks and wanted to help each other rebuild. "Look at this," Emma said, scrolling through messages of support on her phone. Chef Patricia from Le Bernardin wants to feature our kimchi fusion tacos on her restaurant's special menu next month. And there's a food festival in Vancouver that's offering us a premium spot if we want to expand into Canada. The outpouring of support was more than just sympathy for what Emma had endured. It was recognition of her talent, her integrity, and the quality of what she'd built. Jason's attacks had inadvertently drawn attention to Emma's business from people who might never have noticed her otherwise. Over the following weeks, Emma's business not only recovered but thrived beyond her previous success. The controversy had raised her profile in the food community, and her graceful handling of the crisis had earned respect from industry leaders and customers alike. But more importantly, the experience had changed Emma's perspective on her own capabilities. She had faced the worst kind of business attack and emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident in her choices. "You know what I realized?" Emma said as we walked through a farmer's market where her truck was serving a long line of customers. "When you were trying to sabotage my business last year, you were acting out of love and fear. You were trying to protect me from what you thought was a mistake. But Jason was trying to destroy me out of pure greed and ego. And somehow, your sabotage made me stronger, while his made me more determined." "How so?" "Because when you challenged my choices, you forced me to examine them and make sure they were really what I wanted. When Jason attacked me, I already knew with absolute certainty that this business was worth fighting for. I had no doubt about my passion or my commitment." I smiled, watching my daughter confidently direct her team as they served customer after customer. "So my interference actually helped you?" "In a weird way, yes. You made me prove to myself that this was really my dream, not just a rebellion against your expectations. And once I was sure of that, nothing Jason could do was going to make me give up." As we drove home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed since that awful day when Emma had called me a nightmare and walked out of my life. We had both been transformed by the challenges we'd faced, both separately and together. I had learned to see my daughter as an independent adult with her own valid dreams and capabilities. Emma had learned to trust her own judgment while still valuing family relationships. And together we had learned that the strongest bonds are forged not through control or compliance, but through respect, support, and shared adversity. The nightmare Emma had talked about wasn't really me, I realized. It was the fear of never being seen as her own person, never being allowed to make her own choices, never being trusted to succeed or fail on her own merits. By learning to let go of my need to control her path, I had helped both of us wake up from that nightmare into a relationship based on love rather than fear. And in fighting Jason's attempts to destroy her dreams, Emma had shown me that she was stronger and more capable than I had ever imagined. She didn't need my protection from her own choices. She needed my support as she made those choices and dealt with their consequences. "Mom," Emma said as we pulled into her driveway, "I want you to know that everything we went through this year, all the conflict and fear and fighting, it was worth it to get to where we are now. Even the parts where I was the problem, especially those parts, because now I know that our relationship can survive anything. We can disagree, we can hurt each other, we can make mistakes, and we'll still find our way back to love and respect." As I hugged my daughter goodnight, I thought about how different this embrace felt from the desperate, controlling hugs I used to give her when she was young. This was the hug of two adults who chose to love each other, not because they had to, but because they genuinely liked and respected the people they had become. The nightmare was over. For both of us. 2 years later, I stood in the gleaming kitchen of Emma's first brick-and-mortar restaurant, watching her put the finishing touches on a dish that would be featured in Food and Wine magazine the following month. The transformation was remarkable, not just of the space, but of everything our lives had become. "Mom, can you taste this and tell me what you think?" Emma asked, sliding a perfectly plated sample across the stainless steel counter. The dish was an artistic masterpiece, but more than that, it represented everything she had fought to build. I took a bite, savoring the complex layers of flavor that had become Emma's signature style. "It's extraordinary, but you already knew that." Emma grinned, the confident smile of someone who had found their place in the world. "I wanted your opinion because you're the one who taught me that food should tell a story. This dish tells the story of where we've been and where we're going." Around us, the dinner service was in full swing. Emma's team moved with practiced precision, a well-oiled machine that reflected her leadership and vision. Jake managed the front of house with the same quiet competence he'd brought to their food truck operation, while Emma commanded the kitchen with an authority that still amazed me. The restaurant, called Roots and Routes, had become one of Portland's most sought-after dining destinations. What started as a simple food truck had evolved into a culinary empire that employed 23 people and had a 3-month waiting list for reservations. Emma had been featured in national magazines, invited to cook at prestigious food festivals, and courted by investors wanting to franchise her concept. But success hadn't changed the core of who she was. If anything, it had revealed depths of character I was still discovering. "Mrs. Thompson?" A young woman approached nervously, wearing the crisp uniform of Emma's kitchen staff. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to thank you for the scholarship fund you created. It's allowing me to attend culinary school while I work here." I smiled at Maria, one of 6 young cooks who were benefiting from the educational program Emma and I had established together. After Jason's legal troubles had been resolved, we'd used the settlement money to create opportunities for aspiring chefs who couldn't afford traditional culinary education. "The thanks belonged to Emma," I said. "It was her idea to turn something negative into something that could help others." After Maria returned to her station, Emma joined me in the small office above the restaurant, where we often talked about business and life. The walls were covered with photos from her journey, the original food truck, early farmers market setups, the restaurant's opening night, and family pictures that showed how our relationship had evolved. "I got some interesting news today," Emma said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Jason Whitmore was released from prison last week." I felt a familiar protective instinct flare, but it was tempered by confidence in Emma's ability to handle whatever came next. "Are you concerned?" "Not really. His conviction destroyed his credibility in the food industry, and his assets were seized to pay restitution to his victims. But I did hear he's been asking questions about our business." "What kind of questions?" "Nothing threatening. More like he's trying to understand how we not only survived his attacks, but used them to become stronger. Apparently, he's been studying our response to his sabotage as some kind of case study in crisis management." The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had tried to destroy Emma's dreams was now trying to learn from her success. "What will you do if he approaches you directly?" "I'll listen to what he has to say, not because I trust him, but because understanding his perspective might help other small business owners who face similar attacks." This response was so typically Emma, transforming potential threats into opportunities for growth and service to others. She had taken every challenge thrown at her and found ways to use it constructively. "You know what I realized recently?" Emma continued, leaning back in her chair. "The whole experience with Jason taught me something important about the difference between being reactive and being responsive. When you were sabotaging my business, I was reactive. I was hurt and angry and defensive. But when Jason attacked us, I was responsive. I stayed focused on solutions instead of emotions." "What made the difference?" "You did. By the time Jason came along, you had already taught me that I could survive having someone I loved work against my dreams. Once I knew I could handle that, handling a stranger's attacks felt manageable. I considered this insight, recognizing truth in it that I hadn't seen before." "So our conflict actually prepared you for bigger challenges?" "Exactly. You forced me to examine my motivations, defend my choices, and prove my commitment to myself before anyone else tried to test it. When Jason questioned my integrity and abilities, I already knew who I was and what I was capable of. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the efficient operation of the restaurant through the office window. The dinner rush was reaching its peak, and every table was filled with diners experiencing Emma's vision of food as connection and community. "I have something to tell you," I said, pulling out an envelope I'd been carrying for weeks. "I've been accepted to culinary school." Emma's eyes widened in surprise and delight. "Mom, that's amazing. Which program?" "The Institute of Culinary Education in New York. I'm starting their career program for mature students next month." "But what about your job at the hospital? Your life here?" I smiled, remembering when I'd asked Emma similar questions about her decision to leave for Portland. "My life here has been about supporting your dreams for so long that I forgot I might have dreams of my own. Watching you build this business reminded me that it's never too late to pursue what makes you passionate." Emma jumped up and hugged me, her enthusiasm infectious. "I'm so proud of you, and I'm excited to see what you create." "I'm not trying to compete with you or copy your path," I said carefully. "This is about me finally understanding what you meant when you said following your passion isn't irresponsible." "I know, and I love that you're taking this risk. It shows me that everything we went through taught you something valuable too." That evening, as the restaurant closed and the staff finished their cleaning routines, Emma and I walked through the empty dining room together. The space was beautiful in its simplicity, designed to highlight the food and encourage conversation. Every detail reflected Emma's values of sustainability, community, and excellence. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd taken this scholarship and become a photographer?" Emma asked as we turned off the lights. "Sometimes, but I think you would have found your way to food eventually. Passion like yours doesn't stay hidden forever." "And do you ever regret the way everything played out? All the conflict and pain we caused each other?" I considered the question seriously. "I regret the pain, but I don't regret the growth. We both needed to break down our old relationship before we could build something better." As we stepped out into the cool Portland evening, Emma locked the restaurant door with the satisfaction of someone who had earned every achievement through hard work and perseverance. Her food truck was parked nearby, still operating for late-night customers, a reminder of how far she'd traveled from those early days of uncertainty and struggle. "You know what the best part is?" Emma said as we walked to our cars. "I finally understand what you were trying to give me all those years. You wanted me to have the confidence to pursue excellence, the work ethic to achieve my goals, and the resilience to handle setbacks. I just needed to apply those gifts to my own dreams instead of yours. And you've exceeded every hope I ever had for you," I replied. "Not because of what you've accomplished, but because of who you've become in the process." 3 months later, I sat in my tiny studio apartment in New York, surrounded by textbooks and recipe notes from my culinary program. The transition had been challenging but exhilarating, reminding me of Emma's courage in choosing an uncertain path over a safe one. My phone buzzed with a video call from Emma. Her face appeared on my screen, beaming with excitement from what looked like a television studio. "Mom, I have news! The Food Network wants me to host a show about young entrepreneurs in the food industry. It's called Building Dreams, and it would feature people who've overcome obstacles to build successful food businesses." "Emma, that's incredible. Are you going to do it?" "I want to, but I also want to make sure it aligns with our values." The show would include a segment about support systems and family relationships in entrepreneurship. "I'd like you to be part of it, sharing your perspective on learning to support your child's dreams, even when they're different from your expectations." The invitation was both thrilling and terrifying. "You want me to talk publicly about how I tried to sabotage your business. I want you to talk about how love sometimes looks like letting go, and how families can grow stronger through conflict if they're willing to do the work." 6 months later, I watched the premiere episode of Building Dreams from the viewing party Emma had organized at her restaurant. The show was everything I'd hoped it would be: inspiring without being preachy, honest about challenges while celebrating successes, and focused on the human stories behind business achievements. When my segment aired, showing me talking about the difficult journey from controlling parent to supportive ally, the restaurant erupted in applause. But the moment that moved me most was watching Emma's interview, where she spoke about resilience, authenticity, and the importance of staying true to your vision, even when others can't see it. "The biggest gift my mother ever gave me," Emma said to the camera, "was learning to fight for my dreams. She didn't mean to teach me that lesson, but sometimes the most valuable education comes from unexpected places." After the show ended and the guests had gone home, Emma and I sat in her kitchen sharing a bottle of wine and reflecting on how far we'd both traveled. "Do you think we would have found our way to this place without all the drama?" I asked. "I don't think so. We needed to test the strength of our relationship before we could trust it completely. And we needed to see each other as separate people before we could choose to be family." As I prepared to return to New York the next morning, Emma handed me a cookbook she'd been working on. The dedication read, "To Mom, who taught me that the best recipes come from mixing love with the courage to try new things." "This is our story," she said. "The whole messy, complicated, beautiful story of how we learned to love each other better." Flying back to my new life in New York, I thought about the word nightmare that had started our journey toward understanding. Emma had been right that living under someone else's expectations could feel like a nightmare you couldn't wake up from. But she'd also learned that facing your fears, fighting for your dreams, and refusing to give up on the people you love could transform any nightmare into something beautiful. The daughter who had once called me a nightmare had become my greatest teacher, showing me that true love isn't about controlling outcomes, but about supporting the journey, wherever it leads. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.